common sense. Today's show is a very important one because in many ways, many Americans can't get to hear this because it's being censored. It's being censored by big tech, big media, big Democrats. You don't get it on NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN. You know the whole group of, I don't know what to call them. They're not journalists. It's getting closer. They're not even being Americans. This is the kind of censorship that used to happen in the Soviet Union before it was liberated by Ronald Reagan. This is the kind of censorship that goes on now in China. And this is the kind of censorship I never thought could happen in the United States of America. And it should never happen again. And there's only one way to make sure it doesn't happen again, and that is to defeat their purpose and defeat their unworthy candidate, Joe Biden. I am going to explain to you the most critical crimes that emerge from the hard drive of Hunter Biden's and from the witnesses, all of whom, or most of whom, you can see on my podcast, some going back, oh my goodness, 8 months ago, and some as recently as the other day. But let me summarize it for you because it is a little bit hard to follow. But I think if we look at it as a RICO case, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization case, which is a case about the business of crime, you'll get it. And we'll just have to deal with about 5 of these incidents. The first one, that is the one that probably know the most about, is Ukraine. What happened in the Ukraine that was a crime? Very simple. Joe Biden was bribed by Mykola Zlochevsky, the head of a company called Burisma, and Burisma is an oil and gas company. The owner was one of the biggest crooks in Ukraine, one of the biggest members of organized crime, and probably a murderer. So I want to get you an idea right at the very beginning who the Bidens deal with. You're going to see a fair number of murderers, organized criminals, and spies. So Mykola Zlochevsky had a company called Burisma. His company was built crookedly when he was the Minister of Ecology. He gave his company all of the best mineral rights in Ukraine. And when he came out, he was worth $10 billion. When the government looked like it was going to fall, he stole $5 billion, left the country, was in exile, and lived in fear that the new president, Poroshenko, was going to take it from him. He soon found out that the new president was as big a crook, if not worse, than the old president, and that he could be reached. And he also soon found out that the most powerful man in Ukraine was Joe Biden when he was appointed point man by Obama, because he controlled all the money that was going to go to Ukraine. And Ukraine had $800,000 in the bank when their prior leader left with people like Zlochevsky. So Zlochevsky, knowing what the press keeps from you, that Joe Biden had a history as a sleazy Delaware politician and had been taking illegal money with his brother for 20 years, he set up contact with Joe and he offered him a deal. The deal was roughly something that would amount to about $14 to $15 million. Most of it would be paid through a no-show job for his son, Hunter Biden. Now, he never would have hired Hunter Biden for any other reason, because Hunter Biden was totally unqualified. He had already bankrupted a company, and he had just been thrown out of the United States Navy for failing a cocaine test. So he was virtually unemployable except to a Ukrainian gangster. And his father, despite the fact that his son suffered from addiction, had him work for the most crooked man in Ukraine. A sure prescription for that drug addiction to get worse. And who's responsible for that? Well, I guess Hunter is to some extent, but the father put him in a position that no decent father would ever do. For that reason alone, not only wouldn't I vote for him, but if I saw him, I'd spit in his face. You don't do this to your children just because you're so darn greedy to get money. Well, that's what he did. He used him as a bag man. He never showed up in Ukraine. He never did anything meaningful, but he got paid $166,000 per month for a total of about $5 or $6 million paid that way. He got a laundered $3 million additional monies altogether. The Biden family got about $14 million in bribes, and then Biden did his job. When The prosecutor, Shokin, was about to move on the company. He had already arrested them. He was about to seize their assets. He came in, and as he explains, in his own words, in a confession that is as tight as you can get, he explains, I told Poroshenko, you got to get rid of the prosecutor or you don't get your $1 billion loan guarantee, which was critical to the survival of that country. That is also bribery, offering a thing of value in exchange for official action. Poroshenko offered him, not Poroshenko, Zlochevsky offered him $14 million in order to get the case fixed. That's thing of value in exchange for action. He did the same. He offered Poroshenko his $1 billion loan guarantee in exchange for firing the prosecutor. 2 bribery cases becomes 1 RICO predicate. Count 1 in the indictment. Penalty, minimum 15 years in jail. Loss of public office forever. Second one, Iraq. Joe was appointed point man in Iraq. Every time he gets appointed point man, 2 things happen. Joe fails for the United States, and Joe's family gets millions. Pretty good circumstantial evidence that they're a bunch of thieves. So Joe becomes point man for Iraq, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes James Biden, the crooked lobbyist for 20 years, the guy who was making thousands with Joe, not millions, thousands with Joe, doing crooked lobbying. And he becomes a partner in a $1.5 billion housing program in Iraq, and he doesn't know diddly squat about housing. Kind of like Hunter didn't know anything about oil and gas. The Bidens actually know nothing about anything, except they'll do anything for money. You know, Joe was the dumbest man in the Senate. He didn't know much about being in the Senate, but it was a good way for the family to become millionaires. People always say, what was the contribution of Joe Biden? Well, they have the 94 bill that led to mass incarceration, so they don't want to talk about that. You know what his contribution was? He probably made more illegal money than anyone in the Senate, because that's what he devoted his time to. Now we go to Russia. Russia. Collusion with Russia. Remember that? Collusion with Russia for Donald Trump turns out to be 0. Not true. My goodness, the Democrats colluded with Russia. How? The wife of the mayor of Moscow, or I should say the widow of the mayor of Moscow, makes a $3.5 million payment to the same Hunter Biden who can't do anything. Why'd she pay it to him? She is one of the richest women in Russia. She's one of the most dangerous women in Russia. She helped to have her husband deposed to please Putin. She's this tight with Putin. Everybody's complaining that Trump is too friendly with Putin. He's not. He's been tougher on Russia than any American president. And these phony hypocrites are doing this, and they're making money with Putin. They're not just friends with him, they're making money with him. And our phony press doesn't cover it. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to save this country. You've got to save this country from this kind of communist, Nazi, fascist censorship. This is not published. 3.5 million. We have the documents into Hunter Biden's stupid company. And we don't know why. And Joe was asked about this at the debate, and he did what he always does. He lied. And the press did what they always do. They didn't bother to cover it, even though our country is being sold out to Russia. Now, when you go deeper into the hard drive, what you find is there are 2 other payments from her. Gets close to $4 million altogether from this shadowy, very dangerous woman, part of Russian organized crime. And think about Daddy worrying about the drug addict. Now he's got working with a second organized crime big shot, who probably has a couple of murders under their belt. This is how you rehab a drug addict, Dad? God, you should be ashamed of yourself. This would be a convenient time to take a short break. I couldn't believe we were evicted from our home that we didn't even sell. Those are the words of a homeowner, Deborah, when she learned she was the victim of home title fraud. It's a devastating crime that can cost you your home. And title fraud is not covered by insurance or common identity theft services. The only folks to trust that I know of to protect your home's title is Home Title Lock. Cyber thieves have discovered the titles to our homes are kept online. They forge your name on your deed stating you sold your home, and they refile as the new owner. In Deborah's case, she didn't even know she was a victim until the eviction notice arrived in her mail. Home Title Lock protects you and your home by putting a virtual barrier around your home's title. The instant they detect tampering, they mobilize to shut it down. Go online to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim and don't know it. Then use code RUDY, that's me, and sign up for 30 free days of protection. That's code RUDY at HometitleLock.com. Thank you for returning. Now we go to the big place. Now we go to China. We got two deals in China. One occurs when he's vice president. Shocking that we don't know about this. Intolerable, and it requires an investigation of Obama and the Obama administration. Obama makes him point man for China. Remember? Point man? America gets screwed. He fails. And the Biden family gets millions. And you never find out about it because Obama and the suck-up press keep it from you. Because in the words of Joe Biden, you don't deserve to know. You're just a bunch of stupid citizens. You're not an elitist like Obama or like Hillary Clinton or like Joe Biden. In China, Joe Biden takes Air Force Two, and on your money, on your dime, he flies his son to Beijing. He's going there to save America, to get the Chinese out of the islands that they dispute with Japan, and to get them to lower their tariffs. Hunter's going there. This is in between drug rehabs. He's going there. We don't know why. I'm never told. Except the documents tell the story and the hard drive tells the story now. Joe goes there. He fails. Of course he fails. Always fails. Or did he fail on purpose this time? He fails to get them out of the islands. They put more military in the islands. He fails to get tariffs reduced. They increase tariffs. 8 days later, though, the family succeeds in the only thing they're really interested in, money. A $1 billion commitment to a private equity fund that the SEC should have put out of business the day it started. A private equity fund that was a joke. It was idiotic. It stunk. Here were the partners. Hunter Biden, son of the vice president. Chris Hines, stepson of the Secretary of State. China got 2 for 1. $1 billion's still a lot, though. But they also got, you will not believe this, they also got the nephew of Whitey Bulger, one of the biggest organized criminals in the U.S. So now we have him we got the drug addict dealing with, based on his father's advice, who doesn't really give a damn about him, except as a bad man. We got him dealing with the Chinese communist and the nephew of an American organized criminal. This is great surroundings for a guy who's got an addictive personality and has a significant problem with drugs. And if you look at his pictures, my God, it looks like the guy's on crack every other day. So China puts in $1 billion. A couple months later, China puts in another $500 million. Joe loses all negotiations with China. There's an article written that China much prefers to deal with Joe Biden and John Kerry than Hillary Clinton because they're much easier on. But the New York Times doesn't write that their sons are in a private equity fund that got $1.5 billion commitment from China. Do you think you should have known that? You think it's a crime to cover that up? You think Obama knew? I don't know. You think it's worthy of investigation? Nah. Joe can do that. He can have his son make $1.5 billion and screw the United States. Fine, that's not bribery. Of course it's bribery. That's not fraud. Of course it's fraud. For you and me, it would be. For you and me, we get arrested the moment they heard about it. And should be. For Joe Biden, it's even written in a book, and the press, oh, Joe would never do anything wrong. Finally, the last one. The one that is probably the most brazen, and the one that's really a true espionage operation on the part of the Chinese government. They got Joe pretty good. They got him lined up pretty good. They're into the family for about 30 or 40 million at this point, China. But he might be president. China's intelligence operation, of course, is superb. And they got this guy, but no reason not to really jam him really hard and to improve on all the terrible photographs they have in their library on his son and other members of his family doing things that would be shocking to the conscience and illegal. So they utilized one of their major intelligence operatives, one of the highest members of the Communist Party, and a man considered to be one of the richest men in China, according to a tape-recorded conversation where you can hear Hunter Biden's voice proudly saying he's doing business with the richest man in China, Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping's number two guy is a gentleman named Patrick Ho. You can hear Hunter Biden describe on tape Patrick Ho as a Chinese spy master and my partner. We get the tape at the time that the business has fallen apart. But here's what the business was and is. The business is a partnership. American partners, Chinese communist partners. The American partners are Joe Biden, James Biden, Hunter Biden, Sarah Biden, that's the sister-in-law, Gilliers, and the gentleman who has become a whistleblower, Mr. Borodinsky. Okay, what's the deal, as Joe would say? The deal is $10 million a year to the Americans paid by Xi Jinping and his company, CEFC, which is a Chinese energy company and also considered to be a front for Chinese intelligence. And he specializes in putting people in sham businesses where he can compromise them. Ha! He succeeded really good here. He didn't just compromise them, he destroyed them, particularly since Hunter was taping everything and not knowing that he was keeping it on his hard drive. So you can listen to the crime if you want to listen to Hunter Biden. Nobody in our media wants to do that. They don't want you to know it. They'd rather have a major criminal in the White House than Donald Trump because they are sick. They suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. They're consumed by hate. And you can see it in someone like Pelosi. I mean, hate just takes over. It takes over your mind, your conscience. It takes over your rationality. It's probably the most insidious vice you can have. And they have it, boy, and the press has it big time. So we have the deal. Papers are all there. Go to my podcast, you can see it. Go to my website, you can see it. $10 million a year for 3 years to the American partners. However, there is a hidden piece of paper. Hidden, which you have to go dig for in the hard drive, which we did. The hidden piece of paper shows the true division of the equity. And the true division of the equity, right at the bottom, says 10% 2H for the big guy. Who's the big guy? Want to guess? The American press doesn't want to guess. American press doesn't want to cover it. This would be an interesting little game. Who's the big guy? I'm going to tell you who the big guy is. You just spend a little more time with the hard drive, and you find two references by Hunter to his father as the big guy. The big guy, his father, Joe Biden, trying to become president of the United States, as a partner with 3 Chinese communists, 1 an intelligence agent, the second a major spy, and the third an intelligence agent. And he's going to get 10% of the equity. And according to a text, which is a bombshell of bombshells also kept away from you, which you will see right now, very simply, for 30 years, this racketeering arrangement I'm describing to you, I didn't tell you about the pennies they made in the early years. This would be our fourth count, but there would be about 20 counts. In that, there's a very simple statement by him. Read it, you see it. For 30 years, which is about when all the criminality with lobbying started and his having a no-show job at the MBNA Bank, all things that were written about and suspected, but buried by a crooked press that doesn't cover Democrats the way they cover Republicans. That has to stop if we're going to have an America of equal justice. And only you can stop it. You can stop it by voting these Democrats out of office. So they're forced to clean themselves up and come back with a decent party like they used to have. Let's pause for a moment and we'll be right back. Election day is next Tuesday. And you know how important it is. Text would convict them in any court of law anywhere. It says that for 30 years, Hunter's been collecting the money for the family. He's paying for the expenses of the family. And then he's got to give half to Pop. And that's exactly the same arrangement with James, the other bag man, and with Sarah, the other bag man, and the couple of others that way back were involved with it. So we've got a 5-count RICO indictment. Ukraine, 14 million. Iraq, 1/3 of 1.5 billion, whatever the profit on that was. Russia, 4 billion, but a $200 to $600 million money laundering scheme that was put together. China first, 1.5 billion that went into the phony Whitey Bulger, private equity fund. It's where they own Joe. They own Hunter. And then they really wanted to own him, and we end up with Hudson West with the CEFC. That's the Chinese front company with 10 million a year, 1 million up front in a private agreement with Hunter Biden. Show you that one. So this one is the piece de resistance. Because this one, all the years, you didn't get Joe's name in. We do have the admission from his son as to how it worked, but the bagmen are supposed to protect the crooked politician. That's why he had his son there. That's why he didn't give a damn if his son's drug addiction got worse. He wasn't going to use some bum in Washington to do it that could rat on him. He was using his son. But man, they made a mistake here. Outagreed. They wanted to make sure that Joe got his 10%. So they were really cute, very smart. 10% to H for the big guy. What they forgot is, right in the hard drive, there were other references to the big guy, and they refer to Joe Biden. And they didn't think that Mr. Bobulinski would turn on them. And he publicly testified, you heard him, and he's given an affidavit to the FBI that Joe Biden was the big guy, that Joe Biden did get 10%, that Joe Biden was pretty much running the show, and that Joe Biden has been lying for 30 years when he says, I didn't know about the financial arrangements of my son. How many times did you hear him say in his somewhat now affected speech from, I believe, mental deterioration, how many times have you heard him say, I didn't know anything about my son's financial or foreign dealings? Well, Mr. Bobulinski, who's a Navy veteran who was discharged honorably, unlike Hunter, says that's not true. He says you're a liar, Joe. Well, the 10% proves that also, Joe, that you're a liar. And common sense proves it. You flew your son to China. You failed. You got kicked around all over China. Maybe on purpose, Joe, because you knew what was coming. 8 days later, your son, who couldn't hold a job, who can't stay away from crack, where we have 1,000 pictures of him on crack, your son got $1 billion from China, and he didn't tell you. You got to come up with better lies, Joe. And you got to stay away from the White House. You really are completely unfit to be president of the United States. In fact, it's an insult to this country that a man like you is running with the life that you've led of crime and of how often you sold out the United States. So the election's coming up. If you haven't voted, vote and take into consideration, this is a lot bigger than Donald Trump. This is about whether we're going to have censorship, about whether China owns us, and whether we remain the free and great country that we are today. Trump assures that. Biden assures just the opposite. Thank you very much.